Welcome everybody to this interview with Professor Peter Higgins from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. My name is Magdalena Infante. I am a part of the School of Education here at Universidad del Desarrollo. And we are going to be talking today about Peter's area of expertise, which is outdoor learning. As a School of Education, we're especially enthusiastic about this topic because we have recently launched and incorporated outdoor learning in one of our programs in early childhood education. So thanks for being here today, Peter. And before we jump into the questions, I'll introduce you to the audience with briefly a brief narration of your CV. So Peter is a professor of outdoor environmental and sustainability education, following ESD, at the University of Edinburgh. He is director of the Global Environment and Society Academy and the United Nations University Regional Center of Expertise in ESD. He teaches extensively and conducts research on the relationships between these fields and has a focus on sustainability. Since 1999, he has advised the Scottish Government on these fields and shared the Ministerial Learning for Sustainability Advisory and Implementation groups. He has supported education and policy developments in several other countries. He's the representative for Scotland of a UNESCO-related program, expert advisor for the UK Commission for UNESCO, and expert advisor to the Asia Pacific ESD network and the China Nature Education Network. So lots of impact, not only in Scotland, but also in the UK and the rest of the world. And something that I want to underline is that he has recently granted his university's highest award for teaching, which is a great honor. And last note, he was in Chile in 2018, so he knows and he's aware of the potential of outdoor learning here, and obviously about the difficulties too. So we're going to be talking with someone who is someone who knows about our context too. Very glad to have you here, Peter.
Thank you, Magdalena. And beyond all of the rhetoric and the CV that you've just read out, I think people should know that that this area is my passion and my professional commitment, and that being in Chile was a great privilege. And I'd like to thank all those people who brought me to Chile in the first place. I had a fantastic experience, which really has helped me to understand a little of the potential of Chile in this regard. So thank you.
And so the first question that I want to ask you a little bit as an introduction to this topic is that you have researched intensely about the impact of outdoor learning. So the question is, what is the urgency of implementing outdoor education in the school context?
Okay, so you're quite right that I and my colleagues have done quite a lot of research in this area, as increasingly have people across the world. And there's more and more evidence gathering now than there ever has been. If you think about the amount of work that's gone on in terms of research indoors in school-based education, it's huge. You know, there are doctoral studies and big research projects all the time, all over the world. The outdoors has not received anything like that amount of attention. And it's only now starting to become a well-researched and a significant interest topic for researchers. In the school context, I think it's important to bear in mind that you have a range of different ways in which you can engage with the outdoors. You can use the outdoors as a developmental space where you help young people to be physically active and to socially interact with other people, so that they start to develop their personal capacities. And you can also use the outdoors as a subject matter for learning. And so any of the ways in which the natural world or the built environment can be an educational topic, you can use it that way. But you can also use it to encourage a sense of love for, passion for, care for the natural world. And so I would summarize this as saying outdoor learning can be really about being in, being about, being through, and being for the natural world. Now, the research evidence is quite clear that there are benefits in each of these areas. So in terms of personal development, there's a growing body of evidence that says if you take kids out of the classroom, they actually behave differently. Some kids that don't do so well in a classroom are much happier outdoors. There's evidence that shows that health and well-being benefits very significantly from being outdoors and for kids being physically active, particularly if they can be in green spaces or blue spaces. In other words, in green areas or close to water bodies. And that's true of adults as well. In terms of the academic benefits, the evidence is growing that they are very significant. And there are researchers now showing, psychology researchers showing that if you want to teach almost any subject, you're just as well teaching it outdoors, because the children will learn better and they will focus better. Even if people think there are distractions all around them, they'll still manage to study better outdoors. So the evidence is growing in all sorts of ways. And the final point for me is that actually the care for the natural environment is profoundly important for a sustainable future. We need to know and understand nature before we will be able to care for it and then make use of it in dealing with big issues like climate change.
It's very true. In relation to that, I was thinking and reading one of your publications, and you mentioned that this type of education, outdoor learning, is especially important for school students that live in poor urban areas, and that where this type of education has its great potential. But also, there are not so many natural spaces nearby in those areas. So could you give us some ideas or suggestions on how to advance in providing this type of education in this context particularly?
So yeah, you're quite right that, I beg your pardon?
No, how to start going into that direction?
Okay. I think the first thing is to encourage teachers to think differently about using the outdoors. So people often think that you need to go far afield to some distant mountain area or the coast or wherever to do outdoor learning or outdoor education. And yeah, that's lovely if you can, but for most people we can't. So it needs a mindset in the teachers and those who work with the children to say, I can just walk out the classroom door and I can find something to learn from there. Now, there's a word I use, it's not a common word in the English language, but the word is affordances. Mm-hmm. Now, affordances has a technical meaning, but it really means that, let me give an example, right? Here's my mug, all right? I could teach a class based on that mug, because the mug has got pictures on it. We could talk about the design of the mug, how good it is for drinking. I could teach a whole semester on the tea that I've just drunk from there, about the milk, the sugar, and the tea and the water that goes into it. All sorts of things, from British imperialism to environmental issues. All of that is in a mug of tea. Now, if you think about what can be done in the outdoors, the same is true. So if you're in a built environment, the buildings are actually a learning affordance. They provide ways in which you can learn. Who built that building? Why is that building there? What are the planning regulations? Why do people want to live in that building rather than that building? Why do people who live in busy urban areas, would they rather live somewhere else? What about the air pollution that you have? What about the lack of plants? Can you go out and find plants? can you identify what those plants are? Why will some plants live here? Why will others not live here? So I'm just blurting out a whole range of things. Now that really doesn't help very much. It's just an encouragement to say, walk out the door. We have developed a structured approach to this, which is called Outdoor Journeys. One of my colleagues developed this idea, and it's essentially built around asking learners to walk out the door and find the questions they would like to research themselves, bringing those back into the classroom and then working to try to understand them using whatever resources they have, such as the internet, such as books, guides, etc., historical maps, and then developing a learning plan around this. Now, that again is fine if you don't have a curriculum that you have to follow, and that's where it gets much more difficult. So in the early years and in primary, that's much easier than in the high school years, from 11 onwards. But even there are elements of this that you could build into a range of different subject matters. Why not teach mathematics outdoors? How can you work out the height of that building using trigonometry? How long would it take for something to drop from the top of that building to the ground? Just basic mathematics that would be fun to do outdoors, and it provides a context for the maths. Now, that's as well as poetry, prose, as well as geography and biology, of course, which are the obvious candidates. So I think that it's the mindset that is important, and then the affordances of the place will really help. And teachers' creativity is incredible. And so the moment you give teachers the opportunity to say, right, go outdoors then, and they choose to do so, they will find ways. And the kids will help them in that learning process. And if I can just add one little footnote, people often ask me, why use the outdoors? Well, my response, first off, is usually, why do you want to educate kids indoors? Can you give me any reason at all why you want kids to be indoors? And they look at me as if I'm a crazy man. Well, maybe I am, but actually, there is a preconception that indoors is where we do education. And of course, why is that the case? Well, mostly it's just tradition. It hasn't always been that way. So if we start thinking differently, not why outdoors, we think why indoors, then we start to think differently about the whole educational transaction.
That's very true. When I was reading and doing some research on outdoor learning, I was thinking, well, this is something very new to humankind. We've been outdoors for like 100 years. And before it was all outdoors, right? And children were much more free to go and explore and even work in the environment. So it's a very good point. You mentioned recently the curriculum. And I have a question for you. If you could give us examples of national or state curricula in which this topic has been included as a requirement, and how do they work? I know this depends on like the frameworks in which each state develops their curricula, but some examples will illustrate for our learning in this context.
Okay. I'll mention several countries, and anyone watching this recording would probably be able to follow up some of these themselves. But the ones that spring to mind are the Scandinavian countries, where learning in the outdoors is built fundamentally into the curriculum for early years and primary, so up to the age of 11. Most children start school at 7, but they're in early years education before that. And there are many examples of Scandinavian nature kindergartens where it's actually a legal requirement for the children to spend time outdoors, as essentially that's the classroom, and even into primary. So that's one area. Another is in Australia, in the state of Victoria, there are some inclusions there where it's built into a national curriculum. The place that I'm most familiar with, unsurprisingly, is Scotland, and it's important first here to recognise that Scotland is not the UK. The whole of the rest of the UK is different to Scotland. But here we have our own education system and we make decisions accordingly. Now, we have a curriculum here which is called Curriculum for Excellence, and it is the national curriculum for children up to the age of, say, 13, as a broad curriculum. There is a document called Curriculum for Excellence through Outdoor Learning, which talks about how the outdoors should be used in that context to help build all of the skills and capacities that come through Curriculum for Excellence. So I was involved in writing that document, and it essentially says that learning outdoors is a requirement of, or an entitlement of, all young people. Now, there are other policy documents in Scotland which flow from that, and one of them is a policy document called Learning for Sustainability, and that had a subsequent version which is called Vision 2030 Plus, and it's all about how we embed sustainability in curricular learning in schools. Now, these documents are all three together are ones that teachers are expected to pay attention to and use as guidance for what they do. And they all say kids should be outdoors some of the time. They also say that sustainability is a requirement of all teachers and an entitlement of all learners. Now, this is where it gets difficult, because you can make policy as much as you like, but you won't make teachers do stuff if they're too busy or they don't believe it's important. And teachers I have the greatest respect for the jobs that teachers do, but without support, they won't necessarily do this. So what do you do to make it more of an expectation that will happen? Well, the first thing you do is you provide confidence for the teachers that this is worthwhile, meaningful, and it addresses an important need in the learners or in the curriculum. So we've done work to show that that's the case. And we recently completed a very large piece of work for the Scottish Government that essentially shows the significance of those areas for learning. So you make it real and relevant. You then need to provide all forms of training that you can and support that you can, both within teacher education and in professional in-service education, to support teachers in that process. And then you need to find ways of building it into the structures of the system. And the structures of the system in Scotland include the examinations process, what qualifications do students take, and what are the means of assessing whether or not schools are working with these assessment frameworks and curricular frameworks for the qualifications to ensure that they're actually delivering. That's the kind of the big stick part of this. So we have all of these in place for learning for sustainability in Scotland, and learning for sustainability includes outdoor learning, so it's there, but it's not as big, doesn't have as much commitment as we would like to see amongst teachers. Mm-hmm. And we constantly work on this by trying to provide more evidence, more support, and working with the government to do this. It's really important to realise that unless you do all of these things and you keep working at it, you won't actually be able to build capacity. In the end, what you really need is for all the teachers who are engaged to be advocates for what they're doing, and to encourage other teachers in their schools to do the same by saying, this is just brilliant, I wouldn't change it for the world, those who do actually go out and succeed. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it helps a lot. Well, one of the things that can help, I think, is the context that we're living in today, and the consequences that the pandemic has had on schools and communities. And so I ask you to share with us some thoughts about the pandemic and the possibilities and opportunities that you see for outdoor learning after this experience.
Okay. I think the first thing to appreciate is that we've all become used to social distancing. We've all become used to wearing masks, and we're all behaving very differently than we did in the past. Now, that makes me think, maybe we could do teaching differently than we did in the past. And so the first is a mindset that actually we can change, we can do things differently, and we can do things for the common good. If outdoor learning is valuable, if a care for and love of the planet is important to encourage in our learners, we can do this, right? That's the first thing. It's obvious. The next thing is that actually being outdoors, the risk of transmission of coronavirus, or indeed the common cold, is far, far less. A study done recently shows it was about 22 times less likely that you'd get coronavirus outdoors walking around with other people than you would in a classroom or in a room. So it makes sense to be out there. The third thing is in this kind of coronavirus world, and hopefully the post-coronavirus world, the young people we work with are desperate for some different forms of learning. You know, I teach digitally. I'm a great believer in digital education. I've been teaching online for years. But I'm fed up with it, frankly. I want to go out and I want to be out with my students. And all the kids I know are the same. So just because we can do digital doesn't mean to say we've got to carry on doing it. The kids need it. They need it for their health and well-being. And if they're feeling healthy and well, they will engage better. And they will be better learners, and you'll be a better teacher if you're a teacher happening to listen to this. So that's the next thing. The fourth thing is, as I've said, the affordances of being out there provide a very different learning context than indoor learning and online learning. We've done quite a lot of work recently encouraging our colleagues across the university to use outdoor spaces as academics, and the response has been really significant. I'm involved with an organisation called the Field Studies Council here, which I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees, and that organisation is providing online learning opportunities to encourage teachers to go out, and the uptake has been tremendous. And even yesterday I came across a piece of research, low-key research at that, but showing that something like a 32% increase in the number of teachers in Wales, another part of the UK, has taken place with regard to teaching outdoors. In other words, they're seeing the benefits.
Wow.
Now, all of that is a kind of a backdrop, as far as I can see, to the way in which we need to rethink our education. We need to rethink the purposes of education, and we need to be mindful that the young people we're working with in schools are going to live to beyond the end of this century. That coronavirus is going to come and go, as will other crises. They will come and go. And these young people need to be able to adapt to these changing circumstances and thrive as they do so. And that brings me to my final point about this, which is crises will come and go, but there are a number of big issues that are bigger than coronavirus. So I was sent a cartoon recently, which I really love. And if you can imagine a tsunami, all right, so there is a tsunami wave coming over a small group of people. And one is saying to the other, look, we'll be all right as long as we wash our hands and we put a mask on. And this wave is coming over, and that wave's called COVID. The next wave is economic recession, which is much bigger, of course, which we're all going to have to deal with. And then behind that is another wave, and that is climate change or climate crisis, an even bigger wave. And then behind that is another one, which is biodiversity loss. And really, coronavirus will pale into insignificance compared to the issues we will need to deal with if we don't deal with climate change and biodiversity loss. And for me, almost everything I do in my professional life is about trying to support the education systems to help prepare learners to deal with these huge issues that they're going to face. It isn't fair for us to think that we can just hand on issues from our generation to the next generation to deal with. It's unfair, it's intergenerationally unjust. And so the outdoors may seem like a small part of that, but actually opening up the way in which we think about learning, opening up the ways in which we think we can bring about positive change within our society through such processes is vitally important.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Well, we're getting to the end of our interview, so I wanted to thank you, Peter, for your time, for your passion about this topic. You leave us more excited about it than before, and it has been really a pleasure to have this conversation with you. We hope that you can come to Chile some other time, so you are very welcome to do that. And to the audience, thanks for watching, and especially spread the word about this topic, that it's so urgent and important as the big wave that you just mentioned.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I do hope to come to Chile again one of these days. I think very carefully before I get on an airplane these days. But actually, coming to Chile was one of the best things in my career. And I'd love the chance to come again one of these days, as long as I can be useful. So,
of course,
we shall see. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.